Good afternoon. My name is Sharon McCoy-Carroll. The last 11 days have proven to be quite overwhelming that I can't depend on my ability to speak spontaneously. So please understand why I'm reading my verse. Unless I'm mistaken, other than his family, I have the honor of saying I've known Denis longer than anyone else. In other words, we both had our diapers changed by the same ladies in the nursery at church. My earliest memory of having Denis in my life was when we were both in a wedding when he was 4 and I was 5. Our families went to 2 different churches together, and in 1972 we moved to a house a few streets over from theirs. So Denis and I saw each other at church, school, and in the neighborhood. I can't remember too many times when Denis wasn't there. In high school, Denis really stretched his legs with his writing ability and artwork. He was well known for both his beautiful gifts with the pen and the brush. Most of you have had the blessing of seeing evidence of either one of these or both. He was in a class by himself in that he could transfer to the page or canvas what most of us could only dream of. In 1979, he graduated, and we didn't see much of one another because he moved to Colorado. But we saw each other again in 1982 at the sad occasion of his dad's funeral. Who would have known it would be almost 30 years before we see each other again? We both led different lives. He moved to San Francisco and other places and then back to Georgia. I got married, had children, divorced, and went on with my life. As fate would have it, about 5 years ago, I found and friended him on Facebook. We spent hours talking, catching up, and sharing very personal stories of where life had taken us. We became dear friends all over again. And it was then that I came to a very important realization. In all those years, I grew into an adult and went through life's challenges, triumphs, and heartaches. I discovered what was missing was someone who I could have shared all of those events with. All of us benefit from having a true, dear, non-condemning person who shares all life has to offer, yet never judges, who listens, loves, and comforts, and supports, and accepts no matter what. I missed that person. I realized that had been Denis. He was back in my life, and it was wonderful. He was my Denis. I feel it's safe to say that he felt the same of me and called me his Sharon. I came up here to Helen to visit about 4 years ago, and that was the last time that I saw him. We spoke often, and he was very candid with his thoughts, obstacles, and innermost feelings. What a privilege for me that he knew he could say anything, and he did. Knowing the need, he did not find judgment, but acceptance. The day we shared here in North Georgia was glorious. It was like we were never apart for 3 decades. For those of you who came into his life in the last several years, you were a part of his support system. I can assure you he desperately needed and benefited from your touch on his life. In the past few days, I've been able to piece together his last few weeks. Oh, how I wish I had been there when he breathed his last. I went to the hospital Tuesday night, but he was already gone. But he was enveloped with many loved ones, and it's a comfort to know he wasn't alone. And an even greater joy comes in knowing that Marion and Ron and Travis were with him, and that the restoration that needed to happen in their family did come. When we were young teens, I was constantly in his house. Our parents trusted us to behave, so we were allowed to be in his room alone. One day we thought we would see what it felt like to kiss. So we took the plunge. And afterwards I said, well, did you feel anything? He said, nope. Did you feel anything? I said, nope. We knew then forever we would be best buddies, friends, and confidants, and we'd always be there for one another. No romantic love could ever share with what we had. While we weren't physically in each other's lives, most recently, our hearts were always intertwined. My sweet Denis Brent, I love you unlike any other man. I will always carry you here in my heart. I miss you, and I will see you again one day.
Hello, I am Rob Mitchell. I am Dennis's friend from 7th grade. I had so many good times and so many adventures with this man. We had them from coast to coast. We had them in Atlanta and Savannah and San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I can't tell you the fun we had. It seemed every time my phone would ring, he would say, I'm going back to California. He would take a job and just decide, spur of the moment. And I'd say, well, when are you going? He'd say, 15 minutes. And I'd say, what? And he was the worst driver you can imagine. He had this car that his parents had bestowed upon him, and he was the worst driver. He had actually dented all 4 corners of the car. And he didn't pay attention to things like that. And every time I finally told him, I said, okay, every time you go back, you got to call me and I'll drive you out there, because he couldn't have done it. And if you can imagine, once we drove the Wright moving truck out with his cat on the dash, his cat Isis, and he was terrible with directions, and it was almost like, just let me know when we're there, Rob, because he knew I'd get us there safely. And he was just such a talented, creative man. I mean, he could write, he could paint, he could draw, and he did it all really well, and with such heart. I truly would not be the man I am today, standing before you, if it weren't for Dennis. I mean, the saying today is, I got your back. We really did. From 7th grade on, we saved one another many, many times. And he was always there for me, and he just had such caring capacities. I mean, once you met him, you knew that, you recognized that, and he's truly going to be missed. I mean, I had it in my life 41 years, and that's not going to happen again with anybody, you know. And that's really a feat. That's really something to marvel at, to have been that close to someone for that length of time. And I'm just grateful that he was, and he'll always be